As soon as I saw the envelope in my mailbox that morning, I felt something stir inside me. The name on it was familiar. Emily Watson, my sister. Or I don't know if I feel like calling her that anymore. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. She hadn't wished me happy birthday or called me on the anniversary of my mother's death. Emily was one of those who expressed her silence through distance, not letters. But now, she sent me an invitation, a carefully selected cream-colored envelope, my name in calligraphy, Miss Haley Watson. It was a joke. As I opened the envelope, a strange shiver ran through me. Before the paper slipped through my fingers and fell to the floor, I saw the title of the invitation. Welcome to the wedding of Emily Watson and Daniel Cole. Daniel Cole. I suddenly blacked out. My hands sweat. I stood there in the middle of the living room, not hearing anything, not the cars driving down the street, not the phone ringing. I could only read his name. Daniel Cole. That name, even after all these years, was like a punch in the gut. Daniel was my ex, and not just any ex. It was the most serious, complicated, unfinished relationship of my life. We broke up 3 years ago, but time doesn't change the pain of some names, only the depth. And now, my sister was marrying him. I walked into the kitchen, my knees shaking, sat down in a chair at the end of the counter and opened the invitation again. Colorful floral designs, gilded letters, everything done with great elegance. The venue was a country house just outside Lakewood Hills. The date was 2 weeks away, so even time didn't give me time to think about preparation. The first thing on my mind was, how was this possible? Emily and Daniel didn't have a history as far as I knew. When Daniel and I broke up, Emily hugged me and said, "You know he doesn't deserve you, right?" She had tears in her eyes at the time. We even opened a bottle of wine and talked about him for hours. Then there were silences. Time passed. And now she was marrying this man. I reached for my phone to call my best friend Leah. My fingers hovered over the screen. Should I call or should I swallow this shame inside myself? But then I thought, I'm not the one who should be ashamed. Leah picked up in a few seconds. "Haley, is everything okay?" My voice cracked. Emily's getting married. "Well, isn't that good news?" To Daniel. The other side went silent. He took a long breath. "With that, Daniel?" "Which other Daniel do you think it could be, Leah?" "Oh, Haley, I'm coming. Don't tear the invitation." As I held the invitation in my hand, the past flashed before my eyes. It was a rainy spring morning when Daniel and I first met. We were reaching for the same book on the same shelf in the old books section of the New York Public Library. I still remember his first sentence. If we're both Virginia Woolf fans, this could be fate. It seemed romantic at the time. Now that I think about it, maybe she was just a good line writer. But the relationship that started with that sentence turned into a life of ups and downs, but passion for 3 years. And one day, he left without any explanation. Just a note, a 3-sentence goodbye. I don't know what kind of relationship Emily had with him, but I do know that there was more to this story than the invitation. This wedding, it wasn't just a wedding ceremony, it was a show of power. A signal sent to me, but I wasn't one to leave it unanswered. I finally stood up, put the invitation back in the box, and said out loud to myself, "I'm going to this wedding." But the sentence inside me was much deeper. And I'm not going there to prove myself. I'm going there to remind them that they have forgotten. Daniel and I broke up 3 years ago, but that breakup was more of a breakdown than a breakup. A goodbye with no explanation, no answer to the question why, silent as a wall. And the person who hugged me after that silence was my sister, Emily. She stroked my hair and wiped the tears from my eyes. "It's over. It's okay," she said. "It's over, and it's not your fault." She was right. Maybe it wasn't really my fault. But knowing that someone who grew up with her, who knew everything about me, knowing that one day she would marry that man, that was another betrayal. That night, a few hours after I received the invitation, I started going through the albums as an old habit. I still had old photos of Daniel on my phone. I hadn't deleted them. Maybe I thought I'd forgotten, but deleting them was like ignoring them. And sometimes the things you ignore come back to you in the quietest part of the night, without screaming, but exploding from the inside. I looked at a photograph for a long time. It was New Year's Eve. The lights of Central Park were shining behind us. Daniel had his arm around my shoulder. The smile on my face was real, but the first thing I felt when I saw him now, it wasn't longing. It wasn't anger. It was emptiness. It was as if something had been told in this story but left incomplete. I think about how Emily hugged me at the time, and now that I think about it, I ask myself if that was fake too. But maybe that's the most painful part. Those moments can be genuine. Even when a person loves you, they can hurt you later. After our mother's death, we became even closer to each other. At that time, we had to hold on to each other because we felt like we had no one left in the world. And I believed that trust, that solidarity was real. Emily was a witness to the purest part of me at that time. She was the one who saw me without makeup, broken and sleepless, and told me I was still beautiful. And now, she would take the same man's last name. I forgot about him, I told everyone. Leah, my close friends at the office, my therapist. The breakup was hard at first, but then I got over it, I said. But my recovery consisted of replacing one thing with another. Real recovery? That was a whole different journey. And now this invitation was a slap in the face that journey was incomplete. The next morning, I clicked attend on my phone. Part of me said I shouldn't do it. Don't go, it will hurt you. But the other part of me, no, more accurately, my pride, whispered to me that I should go. Maybe it wasn't a reckoning, but I certainly needed closure. Closure didn't necessarily mean yelling. Sometimes it was just walking, making eye contact. And when she smiled, it didn't hurt. I didn't write to Emily. No text, no call. I just hit the RSVP button. I'm going to attend. At that moment, a tiny vibration went through me, like the calm before the storm. You know, the sky is too calm. It's neither hot nor cold, but uncomfortable. And you feel like lightning is going to strike at any moment. That's what it felt like. It was strange to see Daniel again. My last scene with him played over and over in my head. We were sitting in a cafe. He was avoiding the conversation. I wanted to hear it. "I'm tired, Haley," was all he said. I want another life. And he was gone. I couldn't cry or get angry that day. I just froze. Because sometimes it doesn't hurt when a person doesn't love you. It hurts more when they walk away. For no reason, silently, just like Emily is doing now. Betrayal is not loud, but the echo lasts a long time. When I clicked, I agree that day, maybe it still hurt. But this time, I knew what to do with that pain. I wasn't going to let him crush me. On the contrary, I was going to stand up and shrug it off. And when I went to the wedding, I would not just be wearing a red dress, but the last curtain of a disappointment I had been carrying for years. Before we went to the wedding venue, I needed to clarify something. Did I still love Daniel? Or was the source of this anger just pride? There are some feelings that are neither clear in the heart nor in the mind. But when you find a photograph in an old box, that's when the past strikes you square on. I woke up early that morning, trying to make up for a sleep-deprived night with the gray light of the morning. As I was drinking my coffee in the kitchen, my eye fell on the old trunk under the sofa. It was wooden, the corners were worn. There was a small yellow sticker on it, University Years. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Among the contents were mixed photographs, tickets, letters, and a few notebooks. One of them caught my attention, a Polaroid with crumpled edges. Daniel and I in my kitchen drinking morning coffee. My smile is childish, his a little mysterious. On the back of the photo, I wrote in my own handwriting, Even an ordinary morning can be beautiful. November 14th. I looked at the date. That day, Daniel and I talked seriously about the future for the first time. Living together, buying a house, maybe a family. But I found something more important than this photo. Tucked at the bottom of the box, wrapped in an old t-shirt, was a small piece of notepaper. When I opened it, Emily's handwriting was immediately recognizable. The curved letters were written in the usual hurry, but clear. The note read, "Haley, I swear to you, if anyone ever hurts you, I won't even shake their hand. No matter what, I will stand by you. I will never choose him. I'm writing this so that if one day I forget, I can read it myself. Emily asterisk." The date, May 3rd, the day after Daniel and I broke up. At that moment, something hit me, like a nail. Sometimes one suppresses anger, ignores it, says, something happened. But there are promises that shine with betrayal even after time has passed. Emily, she swore to me, and now she was getting married to that man. Maybe I didn't want Daniel anymore. Maybe his departure was my salvation. But this note spoke not of love, but of betrayal. And sometimes betrayal can even be called Emily. I folded the note and put it in my wallet. My reason for going to that wedding was now clear. Not for love, not for longing. I was going there with the weight of this note written that night. Leah came by around noon. "Are you ready?" she said as soon as she opened the door. "I'm almost ready," I said. She picked up the note I'd left on the table and read it. Her eyes widened. Did Emily write this? I shook my head. Does she know about this note? I don't think so. She probably forgot. Leah touched my shoulder. Then it's time to remind her. I recognized the anger in her because the same anger had been undigested in my stomach for years. In the evening, I examined myself in the mirror. My under eyes were tired, but there was a change in my gaze, a sharper, calmer anger, and it didn't scare me because it was no longer the anger of emotional chaos, but of emotional clarity. A few hours later, I received a text message on my phone, and I realized how right my decision had been. From Emily. "Haley, I don't know if you got the invitation, but I'd really like you to come. I hope we can put the past behind us. That's what being a family is all about." Family. She had the guts to write the word family for me, but he was the one who took what was mine. I wrote a single sentence on the back of my notebook that night. Some doors open from the backyard, but sometimes the real confrontation waits at that back door. And I was no longer going to talk about the front doors, but about the memories that came out of the back door. I had made up my mind. I was going to go to that wedding, but not as the old Haley. This wasn't a walk to show myself. It was a stance to remind me, and a stand like that wasn't made alone. Weddings are scenes in a crowd. If you don't have the right person with you, you're just a spectator. But I was going to be the one on the stage, with someone, but not just anyone. I immediately thought of Aaron Miller, the quiet but carefully spoken architect kid. I first met him months ago at the little art cafe in the neighborhood. We tried to order coffee at the same time, chose the same cake, and then headed for the same table. It was a bit too much of a coincidence, but we both pretended not to notice. At first, one coffee a week, then non-coincidental walks, occasional book recommendations. He became someone who started to understand me without calling me. We hadn't called him "we are together" yet. Anyway, we were meeting to build meaning, not to name it. And sometimes the strongest bonds grew silently. I picked up my phone, and for a long time my fingers hovered over the message section. What should I write? There is a wedding. My sister is getting married with my ex, and I'm attending. No. That's too harsh. Another try. I got an interesting invitation. I'd like you to join me. No, that's too airy. Then I just wrote this sentence. I have a strange request. I'd like to tell you about it over coffee if you don't mind. I sent it, Not even 10 minutes later, I got a reply. When and where? I'll come without delay. The word without delay in that sentence. It was as if it warmed my heart. The next day we met at the little cafe. I had just sat down when he walked in the door. He was wearing a gray linen shirt, collar open, sleeves rolled up at the elbows. Simple but elegant. Aaron was always like that. He drew attention without overdoing it. As soon as we sat down at the table, he looked at me. "There's something about you," he said. "Like what?" "Like a storm. But you're in the center of it. Quiet but powerful." I smiled. "I'm going to the wedding," I said. He took the first sip of his coffee. "Emily's wedding?" "Yes." "And the groom?" "Daniel." He put the coffee mug down slowly on the table. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me. There was no surprise or judgment in his eyes, just the attention of a man silently trying to understand me. "I don't want to go alone," I said, "but it wouldn't look good. Is this a show?" "Number. But it's a stage where I have to look strong." He nodded. "I can be with you," he said. "What will people think?" He shrugged. "I don't care what people think. I care what you feel." It was easy to talk to Aaron that way. He didn't force anything. His sentences were short but to the point. And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't looking for a companion. I was looking for a partner. And Aaron was exactly that. "What about the outfit matching?" I said jokingly. "I've already thought about it. Black tuxedo, red tie. Isn't that your favorite?" My eyes widened in surprise. "Do you really remember?" "You thought I'd forgotten, but I heard it all the time in those coffee chats." I swallowed hard. This was what Daniel had never done. Going to the wedding was no longer just a challenge. It was like the threshold of a new door I was opening in my life. It's like holding on to the new while coming to terms with the old. And sometimes, it's not the one who talks the most, but the one who understands the most. Finally, I met with Leia. I told her about the plan. "So you're going with that architect guy?" "Yes." "And not just to show up?" No, I'm really going with someone this time." Leah winked. "Let Haley 2.0 begin." Aaron paused for a moment when he picked up the invitation. He traced the gilded letters with his fingers. "It's pretentious," he said. "I mean aesthetically. But the content—" He looked up at me. "Not very sincere." We both laughed at the same time. Our laughter was short-lived, because the tension inside me was still lurking somewhere. As the wedding approached, everything became more and more concrete. We were no longer talking about once upon a time, but 2 weeks from now, and that difference could make it hard to breathe. Aaron was silent for a while, then he sank down more comfortably on the couch. "Of course I'll go with you," he said. But then he added, "But not just to intimidate your ex. I'd really like to spend time with you." His voice was soft, but the sentence was heavy. Something slowly unraveled in my heart. Not to show me someone. Here was a man who wanted to be with me to get to know me. That's when I realized. This was not a wedding, not a confrontation for me. This was a transition. A step from the past to the present. From brokenness to wholeness. I hadn't named it until that day. But now everything was becoming clear. The next day, we went out together. Our first stop was a men's clothing store. Aaron said he wanted to try on a few options to see what he would wear to the wedding. Even this small preparation made me strangely excited. As I watched him in the mirror, I thought, is this man still on observation for me? Or is he part of me now? He tried on a black tuxedo, neat cut, simple lines. But the most important thing was his choice of tie. He picked up a red tie and turned to me. "This will go with your dress, won't it?" I smiled. "Do you remember that detail?" "I don't forget," he said. "Your face lit up when you said it." There was nothing fancy or pretentious in that sentence, but it said it all. After shopping, we went for a walk. The air was cool. but there was a warmth inside me. It was easy to keep up with Aaron's pace. Even when we weren't talking, it was peaceful. It was as if even our silence was communicating. "Haley," he said after a while, "at this wedding, I don't just want you to look back on your past. I want you to be able to look into your future at the same time." This sentence stopped me. I slowed down. Our eyes met. "What if they are in the same place?" I asked. "Maybe for some people, the past and the future merge into one line." Aaron smiled. "That's when," he said, "it is important for the person next to you to know your direction. Which way are you looking?" He's holding my hand, the way you look at it. That evening when I was talking to Leah, I mentioned Aaron. She said, "Are you serious? So, is there really an emotional connection?" "Yes," I said. "It's not just a wedding partner thing anymore." Leah was silent. Then, "Haley, if this is really starting, you need to cut your ties to the past clean." I said, "I am." But we both knew. Some bonds can't be cut with a sentence. They are erased with a look, an act, a decision. Before I went to sleep that night, I asked myself a question. Am I ready to take this step? Because to go to the wedding, to stand strong there, to be indifferent to Daniel, to be cool to Emily, it all took courage. But the real courage was to make room for someone new. And this time, I didn't just want to look strong, I wanted to feel strong. With Aaron, it seemed possible. When that day came, time flowed differently. The ticking of the clock was slower, but my heart was faster. It was as if my body and time were moving in opposite rhythms. On the one hand, my mind was saying, "Calm down, it's just a wedding." But my heart was getting ready to let the accumulation of years live in a single step. It took me 3 hours to get ready. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror while my hair was in a bun. As I put on the red dress, I wondered if it was too ambitious. But then I stopped. No, it was not a coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence, it was a statement. Red was the color I always felt strong in. They may have forgotten me, but I would stand before them as a woman who had not been overshadowed. My makeup was understated, but I gave my eyes a slight smoky tint. "Make them look like guns," Leah told me. "Whatever you feel, let your eyes say it." When I looked in the mirror one last time, I saw a woman I knew but hadn't seen in a while. This was a Haley who had learned to be strong. And next to that woman was Aaron. Aaron took my hand as we waited in the hotel lobby. There was no rush, no hurry in it. His fingers were calm, but full of confidence. "Are you ready?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "Yes, I am, or I have to be ready." "I'm here," he said. And in that moment, out of hundreds of preparations, that was the most precious sentence. The doors opened. There was soft music coming from inside the large hall. The guests were seated at their tables. White tulle and gold candlesticks glowed under the dim lights. Everything looked perfect, just like the wedding we had imagined in the past. Yes, Daniel and I had once dreamed of this kind of ceremony. Light-colored flowers, simple table settings, a classical trio entrance. But that dream no longer belonged to me. I was just a spectator called into it. I was no longer in the dream, but in reality. I'd be lying if I said the sound stopped when we entered the hall, but the gaze, yes, I'll never forget those looks. First a few people turned their heads away, then the whispers started. The red dress. Who's the man with her? Isn't that her ex-boyfriend? Those are the moments. When time bends for a brief moment, it only lasts a few seconds, but it lives inside you like a lifetime. And then, Emily. She was standing on the opposite wall, close to the engagement table, in a long, cream-colored dress. Her hair fell over her shoulder in loose waves. On the surface, everything was fine. But his gaze, when our eyes met, his expression was clear. First confusion, then a brief panic, and then a controlled smile.
But I knew him. I knew what was under that smile. The question, did she really come?
Answer: Yes, I did, but I'm not the woman you've been waiting for. Aaron leaned toward me. Let's walk when you're ready, he said. It's a bit like a battlefield here. I smiled. And you're my armor. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Daniel. When he noticed us, his eyes narrowed. I squeezed Aaron's hand. I didn't even make eye contact with Daniel. Because I wasn't there to spy on the past, I was there to transcend it. As we walked in silence through the hall to our table, the sound of my shoes on the floor felt powerful. Each step was leaving a piece of the past behind. Every look was an eye still trying to recognize me. But I didn't have to introduce myself anymore, and I was there, and that was enough. After we were seated, Aaron leaned over. I think we've gotten some attention. I said, a little? I said, I think it's enough to be a headline on social media. We both laughed. For the first time, I felt really light. Because despite all the tension, Erin's presence felt like a balance point, not a wall. The smile on her lips as she said my name was faint, but there was a sharpness in her eyes. It was as if he had carefully chosen each letter of her name, finishing with a sarcastic tone at the end. There were 3 steps between us, and then he took those steps. When he leaned in for a hug, he sensed my hesitation. He grabbed my shoulder lightly, but the contact was not a warm greeting, but a finely calibrated move. I wanted to share this with you, he said, because you already know Daniel. The way he said it was calm, but the message was clear. This was not a call for peace. It was an announcement of victory, and I had to watch, not applaud. Hundreds of responses went through me. How generous of you. Thank you. It's wonderful to have the honor of marrying my ex. But I didn't say any of them, because sometimes silence is sharper than words. I just smiled. I'm surprised at such an elegant thought, I said. Emily gave a short laugh, but it was not the laughter of a woman who was really laughing. It was the kind of laughter of someone who admires his own cleverness when he believes he is in control of the situation. As Daniel approached, I noticed our gaze. He stopped for a moment when he saw me. There was an emotion in his gaze that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Was it confusion? Discomfort? Or was it a belated realization that it wasn't going to be that easy? Haley, he said quietly. His voice was flat, but his eyes were moving. It's good that you're here. Emily quickly interjected. Isn't it? She put her arm around Daniel. I really wanted him to be a part of this happy day. And with that sentence, I knew the battle had begun. This was not a moment of togetherness. This was a competition to see who could shine the best light on the stage. But I didn't want to be in that play, because I wasn't someone in the shadows. I was someone who already had her own light, and I wasn't going to let anyone put a finger on that light. Aaron stepped into the conversation. In a polite but clear tone, Emily, the wedding looks beautiful. Congratulations. Emily turned to him. Thank you. Aaron, right? Yes. Of course I didn't see you on the invite list, but it's nice to see you and Haley. A little emphasis, a little hint. You weren't invited, but it's not surprising you showed up, subtext. Aaron just smiled. Surprises sometimes make the day, he said. And without looking at Emily, he gently shook my hand. In that moment, a small but sharp balance was struck. No matter how much Emily tried to control it, Aaron's presence was now in the equation. And this balance threatened not only her aesthetic decoration, but also her emotional power. After a few minutes, Emily moved on to other guests. But as she left, she looked over her shoulder at me once more, as if to say, it's not enough for you to be here, you can't be strong. But I was there, with someone by my side. Someone who supported me not with a smile, but with his presence. And that support was more real than I had ever felt in any relationship in the past. Aaron asked as he walked back to our table, What was that now? When? Emily. She was like a smiling snake. I laughed. Her grace and her war are in the same sentence, and most of her sentences are like weapons. Aaron shook his head. Then you're not going to dance to the beat, are you? No, I said. I walk to my own music now. There were no war cries in that hall that day, but every word was a weapon, every look a move. And this wedding was not celebrating love, but the balance of power. But I neither love nor war. I came to represent myself. Daniel wasn't surprised to see me. At least none of the expressions on his face showed it, but his eyes, they said something else. It was as if the reactions he had already prepared had suddenly become useless. The planned calm gave way to a brief moment of confusion, followed by a word that was searched for but not found. He was looking at me. Not just looking, but with an eye that wanted to see. But that look was a belated search for meaning. Because I didn't want answers, I didn't even want questions anymore. In the hall, people were talking, waiters were serving wine, music was flowing in the background. But at that moment, there was only silence. And two people, one still trying to write a story lost in the past. The other has already moved on to a new page, but is holding the old notebook for the last time. Daniel didn't approach, but from a few feet away, he kept his gaze. He didn't smile, he didn't bow his head. He just stood there. And for the first time, I saw him so clearly. His posture was a little tired, slightly purple under his eyes. The shoulders of her jacket didn't look very straight, and the collar looked like it had been straightened several times. Apparently, Emily loved perfection, but even marrying her hadn't made Daniel straight. And perhaps that was the saddest thing of all. I loved that man once. But now, he was just a silhouette I recognized from afar. Aaron took my hand gently. I didn't speak to him. He didn't ask. But the way his hand grasped my fingers calmed the storm inside me. It was like, no need, Haley. You don't have the answers to the past anyway. And he was right. Daniel's gaze shifted to Aaron. Aaron's expression didn't change. He was as calm as ever. But that calmness, it was a silent superiority. It said, I'm here without saying anything. And that posture was more powerful than 100 words. Daniel took a step. He bowed his head slightly. Haley, he said, close to a whisper. I bowed my head too. I responded not with words, but with a look. Yes, I'm here, but not for you. Emily was watching us from a distance. Her gaze was attentive but tense. She was probably gauging Daniel's reaction, and part of her was evaluating Aaron. I realized then that the real issue at this wedding was not love, but the balance of power. Who carried the past more firmly in front of whom? But I no longer wanted to be part of that game. My game was for another table. And at my table was Aaron, next to me, a real person. As we walked back to our table, Aaron asked, Are you okay? I said, Yeah. I said it without thinking, but then I stopped. Am I really okay? I stopped for a moment and asked myself, what did I feel when I looked at Daniel? Pain? Number longing? That's in the past. Jealousy? Maybe once upon a time. But now, just clarity. It was the first time I felt so clearly that it was over, that it was no more, that it had been exhausted and reborn. And that feeling was freedom. Aaron took a small mint out of his bag. I noticed the sweat on your hand, he said. Sweet things can sometimes drown out the pain. I had to smile. Why are you so right every time? Because saying the right things to the right person at the right time is important in architecture and in relationships. This time, my smile was not half finished. It was a sincere, complete laugh. At that moment, the shadow of the past was erased a little more, and for the first time, I thought that the wedding showed not only the pain of the past, but also the solidity of the future. Some words are not spoken aloud, but they are still heard. The sentences that reached my ears were spoken in a low voice but with sharp intent. Was her ex-girlfriend this girl? I imagined it differently, to be honest. Looks like someone finally found Daniel a real companion, but this is something else. What's Emily thinking now? These words were more dominant for me than the music in the living room, because whispers hurt more than noise. And whispers, they don't aim, but they go around you and slowly encircle you. I was sitting at my desk at that moment, Aaron next to him, champagne glass in his hand. My hand was not on the glass, but on my mind. It was as if my past was projected on the wall and everyone was commenting on that movie. But then I heard another sentence, and it was different. Look, she's elegant. She doesn't avert her eyes. I think she's the real surprise of this wedding. It was a woman's voice. I don't know her name, but her tone was admiration, not judgment. And that's when I realized, sometimes even your silence attracts attention. Because where everyone is trying to win by shouting, someone who is silent seems bigger. Aaron turned to me. I know, these voices are not easy. I turned my head. I thought you heard it. I did. I even wrote some of them down, he said jokingly. I smiled. Doesn't that bother you? No, it doesn't, because I'm not as weak as anyone thinks I am. Besides, if being around you is a point of discussion, it's a point of pride for me. There it is again. That's serenity. It was the confident poise of not just a man, but a human being, and it was the only shield I needed at that moment. There was no Emily in the crowd. She was probably making superficial courtesy rounds at other tables, but I was sure her eyes were still watching me, because people can't turn their backs when the balance they have established is threatened. Emily's equilibrium was now out of balance. I was quiet, but my presence was very loud. Daniel seemed more withdrawn at his desk, his smiles dull, his speech short. He had a mask of, I have everything under control on his face, but tiredness in his eyes. Maybe he wasn't angry with me, but with himself. Or he was just realizing that some choices only shine from the outside. Leah texted me, "You look like a queen, especially that red dress. It's like it burns the shadows." I couldn't write back. I just said thank you on the inside, because that's how I really felt. It was as if the red I was wearing was erasing the grayness of the past and replacing it with courage. At one point, someone at the next table, I don't remember her name, but I think she was Daniel's cousin, stuck her head out. "You're Haley, right?" "Yes. Daniel never mentioned you. I mean, that you were so, well, the thing? Strong, calm, but untouchable." We locked eyes for a moment. "He is," Aaron said, and then, "but only when necessary." I didn't avert my eyes, because there was nothing to avoid anymore. Eye to eye was no longer a sign of war, but of peace. As the night wore on, the whispers diminished, because people began to find a new balance. I was no longer perceived as just an ex-lover, but as someone who came with his own story. And this difference was changing not only the gaze, but the whole balance. At that moment, Aaron leaned in. "What do you think they're thinking now?" "That they are silent." "Is that a good thing?" "No, it's a powerful thing." Aaron shook his head slightly. "Power that comes not from noise, but from silence. You are the silence of this wedding, Haley, and that's more powerful than anything anyone has ever heard." The wedding dinner was in the middle. The music was light. The candlesticks were flickering. The serving plates were being replaced one by one. Laughter, the clinking of wine glasses. Everything seemed normal, but at weddings, the real show begins when the music stops, and every bride who takes the stage is first an actress. Emily slowly made her way to the microphone, without a sign, without a glance. It was as if she had planned it in advance but wanted to make it look spontaneous. This was the role she played best, natural politeness. When he took the microphone in his hand, the room fell silent, a familiar smile on his face. Not too big, but widespread enough. It's as if he's not playing for everyone to like him, but he's sure he's already liked. "Tonight is the best day of my life," she said. "I have the man I love by my side. I'm surrounded by wonderful people." A pause. She slowly turned her gaze to the center of the hall. Then she fixed her eyes on me. And she said that sentence, "But there is someone very special here today, my big sister, Haley." There was a buzz in the hall. Some people knew me. Some people only knew through rumors. But the moment everyone turned their heads to look at me, the whole hall was under a single floodlight, and under that light was me. Emily continued, "The things that happened in the past have made our future even more meaningful today. Her strength has always influenced my attitude towards life. Being my sister wasn't always easy, but she taught me a lot, and to be here today, at this wedding, sitting at the same table with her, is a great chance for me." Applause, smiles. Some guests turned their heads and toasted me, but I just shook Aaron's hand, because the sound of that applause was not enough to cover the anger inside me. The underlying implication of those words was clear. In the past you lost, but look, tonight you seem to be among the winners. He was not praising me. He was exposing me. He wasn't calling me to the stage, but he wanted to open the curtain and show me. And maybe that's what I was most angry about, because even without saying anything, he was trying to rewrite my story, in his own way, in his own tone. And it wasn't a celebration. It was a theater performance. Aaron remained silent, but his fingers were tighter in my hand. It was as if he felt the wave inside me, that hardening jawline, the sudden silence that descended on my face. He leaned in, whispered in my ear, "We can leave if you want." I shook my head slightly. "Number, this show is not for me, but I'll see it through to the end." The applause was still going when Emily put down the microphone. She turned to face me, but her gaze wasn't real. She was waiting for thanks, acknowledgement, a smile. But I just bowed my head. Short, neutral, no gratitude, no anger. Just a gesture that says, "I'm here." And that was it. Because in that look, I was the one who saw the game, and I didn't need to play in that game anymore. Aaron then said, "He didn't do it to everyone, just you." Because everyone needed only one thing to direct their attention, my presence. And why is that? Because sometimes the best person for a stage is the audience, and Emily saw that I was noticed without applause. We went on with the evening, but that moment, that conversation, it felt like a new page had been turned in me. I was no longer just a witness to the past. I was not an extra in someone else's story. I was the leading role of my own silence. He said nothing. Aaron stood up quietly. No one had said anything. There was no announcement, no call. But sometimes, some people get up without being called, because something inside them says now. And that inner voice is stronger than the noise of the crowd. The hall hummed. The guests turned their heads. Some didn't recognize him. Others were eagerly waiting, because this speech was not on the program. And maybe that's why it was more powerful. Aaron walked to the microphone. His steps were unhurried. His posture was erect but unpretentious. He was like a calm force in his classic suit. As everyone in the room whispered, "Who is this?" He began to speak. "Some people in the art world may not recognize me," he said. "I'm Aaron Miller. I'm interested in architecture. I'm here today with someone who has turned the burden of the past into the future." There was a slight silence in the room. The gaze shifted to Haley, but this time it was different. It wasn't judgment, it was curiosity. Aaron continued, Life sometimes presents us with strange choices. Who you think you'll continue with, who you think you'll leave unfinished. But the real question is what those loose ends have made you. And if your past has broken you, believe me, those fractures are sometimes where the light enters. This sentence, it echoed in the hall, as if it nudged a memory in everyone. It reminded someone, unforgotten pains, unfinished stories, and me. I held my breath, because in that moment, something vibrated inside me. Aaron's words weren't just for me, but for everyone who didn't understand me, but mostly to myself. Hearing someone else say the words that my own inner voice hadn't heard in years, it both breaks you down and makes you whole. Emily's face was expressionless, but there was a slight twitch at the corner of her lips. Another language had entered her scene, and it was not the language of control, but of reality. Free of pretense, direct and clean. Daniel bowed his head. He wasn't looking. Either there was regret in his silence or a depth he couldn't understand. Aaron's last sentence was, "I am honored to be here, because today is not just a celebration of marriage, it's also the survival of a character." "Thank you." And he dropped the microphone. A short silence in the hall. Then a few people clapped lightly. Then others joined in. And suddenly, that applause rose in the hall. But this time, it wasn't for Emily. It was applause for respect for truth. Not for acting, but for honesty. When Aaron returned to the table, my hand was shaking. Why did you do that?" "I held your hand," he said, "because you were silent. But your silence was the loudest voice anyone needed to hear." My eyes filled with tears, but those tears were not tears of pain, but of lightness. It was as if a burden I had been carrying on my back for years had been dropped with a single speech. That night, for the first time, I felt protected, not behind my own walls, but in the shadow of someone else's posture. Aaron wasn't just standing next to me, he stood with me. And that difference, for the first time in my life, he showed me what it means to be strong together. After the echo of the microphone faded from the hall, no one spoke for a while. It was as if everyone was weighing something within themselves, digesting the weight of Aaron's words in silence. And I, sitting in the center of that silence, remained with my eyes fixed on one point: Emily. Emily's face was no longer the same as when she first appeared on that stage. That confident smile was gone. The corners of her lips were lowered. It was as if she was struggling to control what had just gone through her, but her expression betrayed her. His gaze scanned the hall a few times, then lingered on me. 1 second, maybe 2, and then he looked away. That's when I knew. The roles had changed. He was no longer the one watching me. I was out of his shadow. I was neither the jealous woman, nor the pity woman, nor the loser woman. I was just there. And this presence began to bother him. Daniel. There was something else on his face. No smile, no anger, just emptiness. His gaze was on me, but it wasn't going through him. It was as if he was trying to remember the past, but didn't know how to feel when he did. So I looked at him, just for a brief moment. And this sentence passed through me. It's over. Because in that look, there was no more reckoning, no more longing. It was just like a shadow in the past, like someone you once loved but no longer know. Aaron was still with me. He was quiet, but his silence was very different from Daniel's. One was empty, the other full. One was waiting for an answer, the other wasn't interested in any answer. The hall was slowly moving to the dancing part. The first dance was done, and the couple was greeted with applause. But I was still caught in those stares, because for the first time I was looking inward, not outward. My eyes caught Emily for a moment, a momentary tension on her face, as if she had just realized that everything was slipping away. She controlled thousands of details throughout the wedding: the angle of the flowers, the height of the candelabras, the hem of her dress. But he had forgotten the most important thing: that the audience of his story was now the protagonist in another story. I was not the winner of this war, because I wasn't fighting anymore. And that was the real win. Coming out of a war you weren't trying to win with peace. Aaron turned his head to me. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said, this time for real, without thinking. Because it was true. I felt strong and complete and not in need of definition. Not Daniel's past, not Emily's plan. Nothing could move me anymore. Sometimes one can solve everything with just a glance. It's a moment that replaces hundreds of letters, conversations, or discussions. And tonight, in that moment, she was in that gaze. Emily turned away. Daniel went back to his desk. I stayed in my chair. But for the first time, sitting in my seat represented determination, not weakness. Towards the end of the evening, the music slowed down. Guests began to say their goodbyes. Empty wine glasses gathered at the edges of the hall. But every wedding needs a moment of silence. And at this wedding, that moment was behind a closed door. Emily called me to her room through a waiter. The bridal suite was a small hall at the end of the hall. White walls, a few bouquets of flowers and mirrors in the center. But the room, it was more like a dark theater stage than a bridal chamber. I pushed the door open. Emily was in front of the mirror. She smoothed the hem of her dress and took one last look at her face. But that face was tired now. The mask she'd been wearing all day was starting to show underneath. "You're here," she said. There was a softness in his voice. But this softness was cautious, not friendly. It was as if he was walking on the edge of a window he didn't want to break. "You called me," I said. She straightened her dress, then turned to me. His gaze was direct but vulnerable. And for the first time, I realized she was tired too. "I wanted to face you," she said. This night couldn't be spent with fake smiles. I kept quiet, because sometimes the best answer is to give space. "I didn't take Daniel from you," she said later. "But when you left, I took him." There was no apology in that sentence, no explicit accusation, just the naked truth. For perhaps the first time, she spoke with an unfiltered honesty, filtered through her. "I know," I said, and that sentence doesn't really shake me anymore. The veil on her shoulder shifted slightly to the side, but she didn't fix it. It was as if he knew that the ornaments had lost their meaning. "Seeing the two of you together," I continued, "once it burned inside me. But now, I've stopped feeling sorry for something that doesn't belong to me." Emily didn't look away. She just moved a little closer. "I've never been jealous of you, Haley." She swallowed those words. "Because I've always admired you. You knew that as a child, but maybe you never heard it." For a moment, I had a flashback to those old times. The bedroom we shared, my old diary, the way he watched me, sometimes silently, sometimes judgmentally. But now I was hearing what was underneath that watching. "Maybe that's why." He paused. "It felt hard to take things after you, like I'd end up in your shoes." For the first time, my breath caught, because it's easy for someone to imitate you, but to carry your absence like a trophy, that's really hurtful. "Emily," I said, "I'm not mad at you, but I'm not sad anymore." And then her eyes filled up, but she didn't cry. "I loved you," I said, "and I thought you deserved to be loved. But with that love, I always kept you in the shadows. Maybe that's why you wanted to throw yourself into the light. And Daniel may have seemed like your light." For a moment, he said nothing. Then in a whisper, "I'm not happy," she said in a whisper. "You just got married," I said. "Happiness doesn't come right away. but wrongs appear very quickly. I went to the edge of the door. I stopped before I left. I can't wish you a lifetime of happiness, Emily, but if the day comes when you choose to be yourself, I'll celebrate that day. I left. I didn't hear what he said behind my back, but a door inside me didn't close. I just felt I didn't need to stay inside anymore. The wedding was over. The music had stopped, and the hall was empty. On the floor were a few broken champagne glasses, half-eaten cakes, and abandoned goblets. But it wasn't just objects that were left behind. All the emotions that had been carried over the night had now turned into a heavy silence. We were walking in the backyard of the hotel. The grass was slightly wet from the night humidity. The moon peeked through the clouds, creating small pockets of light. I took off my shoes. The heels were like a burden I no longer wanted to carry. My body was tired, but inside I was filled with a strange lightness. Aaron was next to me, quiet, unhurried as always. He didn't put any pressure on me tonight. He tried to understand what I was thinking, but he didn't force me to explain. And maybe that's why I felt safe with him, not vulnerable. We walked for a while without speaking. There was only the sound of our footsteps and the distant buzzing of night insects. Then Aaron stopped. He turned to me. There was no question in his eyes. There was only clarity. And that clarity was the opposite of the cloudiness I'd been experiencing all night. "Haley," he said, "if you'll let me, I want to hold your hand." In that moment, time seemed to stop. What he said wasn't big, but what he carried behind what he said. Intention, respect, and most importantly, the ability to wait. It wasn't a demand, it was an offer. And there was not only romance in the offer, there was asking permission to touch a heart that wasn't waiting to be mended. I looked into his eyes. Daniel never asked like that, he just took it. He'd ask for attention, make a decision, then leave. Aaron was waiting, standing next to me, in his own space but close to me. And now he wasn't asking for my hand, he was asking to walk with me. "Will you let me hold your hand?" That sentence was the simplest, yet the truest question I had ever heard in my life. I nodded my head. "Yes," I said. Just one word, but it had years of silence in it. Years of "I'm fine" lies. Years of "I don't need anyone" stubbornness. It was no longer weakness to need someone, because if that person didn't make you feel incomplete, it wasn't love you needed. It was balance. He took my hand. The palm of his hand was warm. But it wasn't the warmth of skin, it was the warmth of being. He didn't hold it tight or loose. Just right. No pressure. Just a contact that said, "I'm here." "Tonight, a lot happened," I said. Aaron shook his head. "I just tried to figure out what you were thinking." "Sometimes I don't even know what I'm thinking," I said. "That's exactly why I'm here," he said. "To give you space to think, to love you in a process, not a decision." That sentence shook me, because for the first time, someone didn't see me as a finished person, as someone who kept going. We kept walking. There was no need for words anymore, because some people will listen to you even if they don't speak. And Aaron was just that kind of person. I was no longer a hurt woman. I wasn't trying to look strong. I was me, and someone had chosen that version of me. Without trying to polish my broken places, someone who wants to be there for you just because I'm there. The wedding was over. The hall was packed. The flowers were wilting. Everything that had happened that night, the applause, the looks, the silent battles, was behind us. But in the morning, at the end of it all, something new began. I found myself in the hotel room in front of the mirror. My makeup was wiped off. My hair was a mess. But my face, for the first time, it was so familiar. Not tired, not worn, just real. I opened the curtains. The morning sun was seeping into the room. And at that moment, I realized the day had dawned. But it wasn't just a physical light. Something inside me had lightened. What I had experienced during the night was a storm that had built up over the years, but now that storm had receded, leaving only me. And this loneliness was not lack. It was freedom. Aaron left the coffee on the balcony and left quietly. He didn't say goodbye or stay, but even his absence was now a warm presence. Because sometimes it's the people who can leave you as you are, who leave the deepest traces in your heart. That morning, I whispered something to myself. I didn't say it out loud or write it down. It was just a sentence that came from my heart. What is destroyed by betrayal can sometimes be rebuilt by true love. Because now I knew this. To be broken did not mean to crumble. Sometimes being shattered was a chance to be reshaped. Emily and Daniel will move on. Maybe they'll be happy. Maybe they will live with regret. But what they do in this story now, it didn't affect who I was. Because now I was writing my own story. Not between their lines, in my own words. That night showed me what can exist in the unexpected corners of life. Happiness sometimes comes uninvited. Sometimes when those who invite you to a wedding hurt you, someone who never calls will mend your heart. And perhaps most beautiful of all, there was no winner or loser at the end of this path. It was enough just to be a learner. I took off my red dress. I hung it on the hanger. But the red inside me was still there. Strength, determination, and the warmth of a new beginning. On my way out the door, I took one last look in the mirror. I said to myself, this is your story. It's a path you have drawn, not one written by others. And choosing not to walk that path alone anymore, but to walk it together, is not fear, but courage.